Can you ladies see me? Hello? Can you see me or just hear me, Lisa? Can't see you. Let's see. Mhm. Sade? Oh, you do see me. Okay. Good, good, good. Can see and hear. Perfect. Thank you. It was asking me to share my screen and I thought that I was. So thank you for confirming that. And the sound is okay. I got my microphone set up and this is all technologically beyond me. And Sadie helped me set everything up and I appreciate you helping me test this out. Thank you so much. I have to try to not pay too much attention to the chat right away. I have to adjust to this format of just talking as opposed to our video calls when we can all hear one another. But again, thank you so much for helping me test this format out. It feels very unusual to me, I have to say. Um, but we are going to tap tonight live together. I will talk a little bit about what tapping is and what the practice is going to look like. And I will plant the seed at the moment that I had the thought to possibly tap on the subject of people pleasing. So you can meditate on that a little bit while I talk about the practice itself. And then we can either go with that as a subject matter, or if there's anything else that anyone wants to suggest, we can adjust accordingly. So, what tapping is a do it yourself tool, or will be do it yourself by the end of this call, to help soothe our nervous system and bring us back into a state of calm and heart brain coherence, as opposed to the fight or flight mode that we spend so much of our time in. Life has a way of feeling very urgent all the time and like it's constantly shouting for our attention. And we really need practices like this that bring us back into our body and back into a state of calm. So that is what this practice is intended to do. And it does that through means that are very similar to acupuncture or acupressure, in that we are connecting with the energetic body and combining that with spoken words to, again, bring us back to a state of calm and safety. Because there are very few things in present day to day life that are at the level of threat that it sometimes feels like. So, this helps us remind ourselves of that so that when there is something that needs to be dealt with, by doing practices like this, we increase our ability to deal with things that actually do need our attention. But at the same time, we're recalibrating the level and intensity of attention that we're giving to whatever the subject at hand is. So, what the practice will look like is using a series of tapping points. You can use your right or your left hand to tap on the right or the left side. I will, once we determine our subject matter, and if anyone wants to contribute anything, I will do everything that I can to bring that into the practice. So, based on what we talk about after this description of the practice itself, I will craft that into what we call a setup statement, which is acknowledging the feelings of the group as they exist presently. So we want to be very honest with ourselves about what we're experiencing, because we're not trying to bypass anything or override anything. This is a start where you are practice, acknowledging what is live for you in the moment, and then working with that and allowing that to gently be transformed across the practice itself. So I will start by, again, bringing the group thoughts into what the setup statement. And all the while that I'm doing the setup statement, we'll be tapping on the side of the hand, just this meaty portion of the side that they call the karate chop point. And I'll do 3 different takes on that setup statement, 3 variations on that theme. And then we'll be completely done with that tapping point, and there will be an 8-point loop that I will be doing the entire time with you. And once I start the words of the practice, my eyes will be closed. So you'll be looking at me, but I will not be staring back at you, even by video. So everyone can really be having their own individualized experience of the practice. And I will be breaking my phrases into just a couple of short words, and then I will pause. And when I pause after each phrase, that is your invitation to repeat the phrase or to modify it however you see fit, especially since I can't physically hear you. I very much invite you to make this practice your own and to change the words however you would like to. So 8-point loop that we'll use after we're done with the karate chop point is the top of the head. And I don't count the number of taps at each location. I just kind of tap while the words are coming through. Then the pause, which again is your invitation to repeat. And then the next tapping point. So the second one is right where the eyebrow hair starts. So not quite dead center, but a little bit left or right of center. Okay. And then the third one is the bony outer edge of the eye socket. So that's number 3. Number 4 is the under edge of the eye socket. Number 5 is between the nose and the upper lip. Number 6, between the lower lip and the chin. Number 7 is just below the collarbone, left or right. You don't want to tap right on the collarbone just because it's kind of uncomfortable. So just a little bit below that. And then the 8th is the side of the rib cage. So again, left or right, you may want to raise your arm up in the air, cross one arm over and tap under. That one's a little bit awkward, but again, I can't see you. So however you want to get to that side of the rib cage tapping point. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And again, I will be sharing the words, allowing the time for repeat, and I will be doing the actual tapping on myself. So you'll have me as a reference point. You don't have to memorize the tapping points. If you close your eyes yourself because that helps you get absorbed in the practice, absolutely fine. If you miss tapping points as you're doing that, also absolutely fine. I've been in live practice with people who, at the end of the practice, opened their eyes and panicked and said, I was doing the top of my head the entire time. I never did any other tapping point. And I said, that's great. It means you were really, really into the practice and focused on that. So this practice has a lot of flexibility. You're not going to get it wrong. You're not going to make any mistakes, and you will never do any harm doing this practice. So it is very safe, very versatile, very personalizable, if that's a word. So that is what it will look like. So if you have any questions about the practice itself, you can feel free to type them into the chat. And if not, what do we think about the subject of people pleasing for this evening? I think it's something that a lot of us have experience with. Let me know if it would please you to tap on people pleasing. um, the interesting thing about people pleasing is that it is, oh, April, you like this? You like the topic? Thank you. Thank you again so much for being here. I'm seeing your comments and it's just so deeply appreciated. Um, People pleasing is often something that begins very early in life. All right, we got Laura on board with the topic too. Awesome. Love you too. Yes, people pleasing often begins very, very early. It can even begin before we're even verbal. before we're even speaking, we are already reading the room, so to speak, and taking account of others' energy and noticing very subtle shifts, especially if the early environment wasn't giving us exactly what we needed. We are, as humans, so adaptable in ways both positive and negative. It's a beautiful thing to attune to others and to try to determine what is going to make other people happy and bring joy and bring comfort and lightness to a situation. But that same tendency can become, it can go all the way to toxic, but it can just be very harmful individuality when we think that it is our job to adapt and adjust to what others expect. And sometimes we're doing it without even realizing it, and we're guessing at things that other people want, and we may not even be accurate. So we're adjusting ourselves according to expectations that are completely fabricated in our own mind. And what pleases one person is not going to please another. They may be in direct opposition, where what makes one person actively happy makes somebody else actively unhappy. So if we're constantly adjusting ourselves in that way, we are fighting an unwinnable battle. And if done too habitually, we really lose ourselves, sometimes completely, and we don't even know what we desire as individuals any longer, because our whole life has become adjustment and adaptation. So obviously we don't want that. When we are young, if again, because of early environments, this becomes our tendency, we may not ever even fully develop our sense of individuality, which at as adults. And that's what we mean when we're about inner child work and shadow work and bringing back to our own consciousness. And sometimes not even bringing back, sometimes it's for the first time, things that we very early on suppressed and forced down and denied in ourselves, if we thought that they ran the risk of getting us rejected. Because when we are young and vulnerable, we do, in fact, need our caregivers to hopefully provide at least the basics in the form of shelter and food, if not love and attachment. And our very primitive brains remember that in times far past, rejection from your core group of origin could very easily and quickly lead to physical death. Because if you were not provided for by your group, by your tribe, by whatever it was that was that core unit of existence, you would not make it. And that primitive part of our brain knows that, and knows that on some level, we as humans biologically need connection and acceptance. But the way in which we need that now is very different from when we were young and vulnerable and completely dependent on our environment. Everyone who's here presently has agency, has free will, has determinism. And even if it might feel vulnerable or scary, we can change our circumstances. So we want to invite back to our awareness all of the aspects of ourself that it may have felt too unsafe to show at some past time of life. So, does anyone have any thoughts or tales of how maybe they've people pleased, or is there something that you can feel or sense in the body when you notice that you're slipping into that tendency? Is there any red flag, or is it something that's just so automatic that you don't realize until after the fact that maybe you have said a yes or a no that wasn't genuine. There's that scriptural quote, let your yes be yes and your no be no, which means we don't want to be giving fast answers that aren't authentic to how we actually feel. So if you're agreeing to things quickly because you want to be seen as agreeable, and then later you're feeling regretful and you know that it's not something that you want to do or commit to, that is a real red flag that tells you that you're people pleasing. So I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Does anyone have anything to contribute on the subject or anything, any questions, or how do you connect with this subject matter, or should I just keep rambling? April said she starts to feel like a kid inside, and that's your sign. So does that mean does it come up as fear? Does it come up as vulnerability? Does it come up? Sometimes it's a physical inability to speak, which, we may have begun our pleasing tendencies before we even had the physical ability to speak. So by the time we gained words, we were already trained out of the habit of offering up anything contrary or even authentic. A lot of us may have come from environments where it didn't feel like our voice or our opinion mattered. So there could be a sense of, well, I don't like conflict. I like to keep the peace. And there have been times in the past that I've spoken up and it didn't matter. So we can take on kind of like a why bother feeling about sharing our voices and being authentic. And, you know, we say yes when we don't mean yes. You can feel it physically in your throat, Lisa said. Yes, yes, definitely. We can feel that blockage. We know usually we know in our hearts and in our gut what we want to say in a given moment. But there is that fear, there is that vulnerability, there is that blockage, there is that trying to figure out what the response of everyone in the room is going to be, and is that going to be okay, and can I survive disapproval? Can I survive maybe rejection from a certain social group? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that mean? What long-term consequences might that bring? And that is very scary. That feels very scary. Yeah. So Lisa said you can identify with that feeling of why bother. Is that you, Christina? Thank you for hopping on. Yes, I have experienced a lot of that. Why bother? And that combined with, for myself, I got goosebumps when I said that because it's very true. And combining that for myself with, I lost what I was going to say. Oh, with a very um, strong conflict avoidance. Um, I hate it. I hate conflict. And so sometimes it feels easier to say a reluctant yes to something just because I don't want the conflict. But then a major red flag for me personally is anger and resentment. If I look at the tasks and responsibilities at hand and I feel angry or resentful or exhausted, or I will find sometimes that I might be putting unspoken expectations onto other people because I'm keeping a mental inventory. Like, well, I've done all of these things. I thought that by now, hi, Christina, that someone would have reciprocated. Or, I've been stepping up to help in certain ways. I thought that maybe someone else could have taken a leading role on this next thing, but it's crickets. So I'll just say another yes because this has to happen. And again, in a lot of cases now, that sense of this has to happen isn't real. It feels like very real pressure on us, but we're putting a lot of that on ourselves. And there is a surprising number of things that we really can relinquish, and the world keeps turning and the sun keeps rising, and maybe not everything is perfect, and that's okay. We are not going to physically die from these situations that call us to be more authentic. We can give ourselves the acceptance and the approval that we used to be so dependent on our environment to gain. So that is a big part of what we want to do with tonight's practice, is to plug in with that self-acceptance and that promise to ourselves that we will not abandon ourselves, and that we will see ourselves through whatever discomfort might arise as we break. Well, I should say not break. I did a video about not trying to break our habits, but just trying to interrupt them. If you have a habit that's really long-standing and persistent, just a little interruption of that is a huge victory. So just catching yourself about to say a quick yes to something when you know that you really don't want to, and staying with yourself through that discomfort. And maybe it means being absolutely silent. Sometimes things don't even require a spoken no from us. It's just the absence of a quick yes. And sometimes that can just be as simple as slowing down and really looking at what is being asked of us. And does my yes really mean yes? Or do I feel that resentment? Do I feel that resistance? Do I feel my throat trying to hold me back from speaking that yes because it's really not genuine? So, those are some ways that we can check in with ourselves and regain contact and familiarity with those parts and pieces of ourselves that we may not have even ever met before. This might be so foreign to those of us who were really maybe conditioned into people pleasing very young, that this might be in some cases a brand new process. So it really is a big promise to oneself to stay with yourself through that. So, any other thoughts on what I've said so far? Or do we want to move right into the practice? Does anyone have anything specific that they would like me to bring into the practice on the subject of people pleasing? Thank you, April. You said you're resonating with pretty much everything. Yes, we've talked about this a lot one on one and come from, the same stock. So it is, I know, familiar to us. Christina, do you have anything? Not to put anyone on the spot. Oh, good. I'm glad that this is what you needed. I really do too. Some of you know that I was tapping weekly at a local library for a number of months, and it was growing exhausting, like preparing for it and physically getting there. And a couple of times I had a real nice circle of, 10 or 12 people, but on average, it was just a small handful. Sometimes it was only one or two. And so I decided to take a break from that in that format. But I will say that even though it was a lot of effort and outlay, that regularity of showing up there week after week, and like I'm saying for tonight, showing up for myself, because at a minimum, I mean, there was never a time, thankfully, that nobody showed. And I think there was one time that I had one person show. So we just had a little one on one session, which was fun. Um, but it meant that I was tapping every single week at a minimum, and then often in between that as well. And with, gently releasing that commitment, because in that case, that was my early yes was a yes. And I was raring to go and I was excited. And I would say for months, my yes was yes. And then I could feel in me that my yes was shifting to a maybe, leaning towards a no. And I honored that. And there was no conflict in speaking that. And I was able to gently release it in a way that worked for everybody. And I, gave the equivalent of notice, even though it was an unpaid volunteer thing. And everything was fine. They were appreciative that I did it for all the time that I did it. And if I were to go back to them and say, hey, let's pick that up again, or maybe let's do it every other week or even once a month, all of that would be fine. So that was a recent personal example of mine putting into action what I'm talking about here. And out of that authenticity came the end result that everybody involved, myself included, was actually pleased, without any performance or inauthenticity. So I myself need those experiential examples for myself to gain that reassurance that it really, really is okay to do this. And furthermore, it is really beneficial to our relationships because if people pleasing is such a strong tendency in us, you might say one thing to one person because you think that that's going to please them. And then you might be turning around and saying something different to another person because you're reading that pleasing them looks a different way. And that it can make us seem untrustworthy because, say, those two people then have a conversation with each other, they are in possession of polar opposite experiences of you. And then people don't know what's true and they don't know what in you is real and what is performance. So, what seems like a commendable tendency to, again, want to keep the peace, avoid conflict, make people happy, it can really backfire on us when it leads to a level of inauthenticity that can even border on manipulation, where we are saying our yeses and nos in order to actively influence the way that people think about us or perceive us. So, in the long run, and even in the short run, it is better to allow relationships to recalibrate themselves if they need to, based on our authenticity, rather than to disappear within our relationships because we are putting on a performance. So, let us go through the tapping practice. And, before we do that, maybe you just want to call to mind your tendencies to people please and what that feels like when you feel it in your body, feel it in your throat, you feel that inner child. What is the intensity of that on a 1 to 10 scale? 1 is just kind of like, yeah, I'm vaguely aware of it. And 10 is like, I am unable to speak. Like, this is maxed out. And if you just want to, for your own purposes, give that a number rating so that then once we go through the practice, you can call that to mind again on the other side and re-rate it with a new number, which is hopefully much lower than whatever you give it now. So just think about that for yourself. Oh, Christine, you said it feels very fear-based. Yes, it is very fear-based because that fear of conflict or rejection is so primal in us that we can convince ourselves that it is a matter of life and death. It can feel that fearful, and the ground beneath us can feel so uncertain that it's like, if I speak my truth here, I don't know where I'm going to land. I might just go into free fall and have nothing and no one to catch me. So yes, that fear is very, very real. So again, when you call that to mind in whatever the most likely situation is that you tend to people please, give that 1 to 10 number rating And we'll see if through the course of the practice we can't calm that down a bit. Okay. So let's just take a few deep breaths together. Breathing in gratitude to be able to share these universal feelings that I think we all experience at least a little bit, at least sometimes, if not a lot of the time. And feeling grateful that we can share this authentically with each other in this virtual space, able to be connected even from our distant locations. Breathing in what's fresh and authentic and true to your spirit. And starting to breathe out these unhelpful patterns and habits that we've maybe been carrying for our whole lifetime here. Just allowing ourselves to slow down together. Maybe taking a few of the deepest breaths you've taken so far today, really letting your abdomen, your diaphragm fill up on the in-breath. And then exhaling slowly, completely, emptying out, emptying out, emptying out. And staying with that slow, deep breath, I'm going to start to tap the side of my hand. I invite you to do the same. And I'll start with the words in just a minute or so. Even though I may have, no, you can repeat, even though I may have a very strong tendency to want to people please, I am learning that honoring my authentic wishes actually makes me more trustworthy. Even though I dislike conflict, and I do everything possible to avoid it at all costs, I am no longer willing to continue to do this at the price of my own authenticity. Even though the very thought of saying a genuine no can make me feel like a small child whose voice is caught in their throat, I promise to remain with myself through this discomfort to arrive at a place of greater wholeness and authenticity. So now we're done with that tapping point. We'll begin the 8-point loop. this tendency to people please, this inclination to perform, this fear of creating conflict, this reluctance to create disharmony. It makes my words catch in my throat. It makes my heart beat faster. It makes my body temperature rise. It feels so scary. I can hardly remember a time when I felt completely safe to express my true wishes. People pleasing has become such an ingrained habit that I may be out of touch with my authentic desires and my true wishes. I may be so accustomed to giving a quick yes to every request, every commitment, every invitation that comes my way, because I am too afraid to give voice to my truth, that I don't always enjoy what others enjoy, that I really don't have the time or bandwidth to take on one more thing. But the fear of rejection or exclusion or conflict that my genuine no might give rise to feels terrifying, feels so uncomfortable, feels so uncertain that it might feel easier to overload my plate with far more than I know I can handle, just to avoid that discomfort. But when I do this, I get angry with myself. I feel resentful. I feel frustrated that I've done it once again. And also, I am objectively overwhelmed, taking on too much just to maintain an imagined sense of peace and harmony. But this habit may be so strong in me that I don't even know what the alternative might look like, might sound like, might feel like. It is all so unknown that feels scary too. It kind of feels like a no-win situation. But maybe a good starting point would simply be to slow down. Because many times when I find myself overloaded, it is a result of replying too quickly, when in reality, there are very few requests or invitations that actually require an immediate response. So by slowing down, I give myself the chance to weigh and measure my genuine response. I give myself the time, the space, the self-compassion to truly think through what it would look like and feel like if I said yes or I said no. To check in with my heart, with my gut, with my energy, with my own desires, in order to arrive at my authentic response that is honoring of my whole self and my capacity As I do this, as with any practice, I gain skill. I see that things are survivable. I see that I can remain present with myself through whatever discomfort might arise as a result of handling things in this new way. By doing this, I grow more familiar with my true wishes, my desires, my authentic self. Possibly for the first time. It's never too late for this. And I feel excited about how this might shift my way of moving through the world and showing up in relationship. If there are people who rely on my pleasing, my inauthenticity, my performance, they might not like it. And that will introduce other levels of discomfort that call for me to remain present for and with myself. Because that type of relationship is not true relationship. It may be codependence. It may be enmeshment. It requires recalibration. But my increased authenticity will only strengthen my genuine connections. And I cannot wait to see how that feels. So I promise myself to slow down, to check in with myself, to let my yes be yes and my no be no, And to do this with supreme self compassion. And so it is. And now let's close our tapping practice by tapping our inner wrists together and taking in a really, really deep, full inhale, filling yourself up, 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 more than you even think possible. And then exhaling fully and completely, emptying out, releasing those old beliefs, those old habits and patterns, letting them go, letting them go, letting them go. And then we'll just come to stillness for a few breaths together, letting the practice settle in. Let's do one more nice deep cycle of breath together. And if your eyes were closed, you can gently open them back up when you feel ready. And check in with yourself. And if you gave that inclination to people please a number rating before our practice, go ahead and check back in with yourself and see how that's feeling now and how your connection with yourself is feeling. And feel free to put anything in the chat. Thank you, Lisa. And hopefully everybody feels just a little bit more permission, a little bit more freedom to go forth and be authentic and to say what you mean and mean what you say. And if nothing else, just to cultivate that self-trust that it will be okay. And I meant what I said in the practice, where there will be relationships that maybe get weaker as a result of your authenticity. But I would say that that is, albeit uncomfortable, a necessary recalibration, because those relationships that depend on us saying yes even when we don't mean it, and contradicting our true desires and our authentic selves, are not the type of relationships that are ultimately fulfilling. So just promising, like I said, to stay with yourself as those things recalibrate, but you will at the same time notice the strengthening of existing relationships that are truly mutual. And in addition, you will probably notice fresh, brand new relationships coming to you, because when we are authentic, when we are honoring our true whole selves, that radiates and people can perceive that, and people feel comfortable knowing that you are being authentic and that you are consistent and that you show up the same reliably. People like that. It is calming to others' nervous systems when we are functioning from a place of calm authenticity. So you will see people just out and about in the world responding to you differently when you are holding yourself differently and showing up for yourself differently. So, speaking of showing up, thank you all for showing up and helping me test this. I really appreciate it. After we conclude tonight, please feel free to be directly in touch with any feedback, any subjects that you would like to tap on in the future, because I hope to continue. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I am going to continue doing this. Thank you, Sadie, for the technical help to get me to this point. I don't know if I would have sorted it out on my own, and she was great getting me to this point. So thank you so, so much. Very relaxing. Thank you, Laura. You deserve to feel very positive. You help so many people and you give so much energy. And I know that you fill up that calendar of yours. So just make sure that you're giving yourself permission to slow down. And when somebody wants to offer something in your beautiful space, you can take a breath and take a beat and look at your calendar. And if it's too full for a couple of weeks, then you just push that event a little bit down the line. If someone really wants to work with you, and they are going to want to, um, they'll wait. They'll wait. And it will happen when the time is right and things get to unflow more gracefully. And you've got a nice flowing calendar for yourself. Thank you, Sadie. Thank you so, so much, all of you. Are there any final questions or comments before we depart? I think this might be available as a replay. I'm not sure. We're kind of testing that out too, but I think that it records. So to be determined. And if by chance it didn't, we'll figure out how to do that for the future and make sure that other tapping sessions are available after the fact. All right. Thank you so, so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. And I will tap with you again soon. Peace.